Hi everyone, it's Kristen. It's been a while since I've done an actual video where I'm sitting here talking to you guys. So when I heard about the new content of the X-Men 97 cartoon show, I knew that there were a couple of videos that I needed to do because some of those titles sound like they're based on like stories in the comic books. And I was just kind of curious as to how they were going to do that in the cartoon series, considering there are some factors that haven't been set up yet. So the first one we're going to talk about is the Trial of Magneto, which that happens in the second episode, which the two episode premiere is soon. Like I'm so excited. I can't wait. It's gonna be so great. Um so now that we know about the trial of Magneto, his the choice of the costume for his second X-Men action figure in this and in the 97 wave, because of course he's already had the traditional one and then he had the second one in the purple outfit. Now that we know that it's the trial of Magneto, that makes total sense. So this is what we're going to be talking about today. And you can see, obviously, there's the outfit. So, like I said, makes total sense. Um, so since there's a couple people that are introduced in this comic, I wanted to just briefly get to their first appearances. The first one is Val Cooper, which Dr. Val Cooper, which she's going to be in the X-Men 97 cartoon series. She's actually being played by Catherine Disher, who originally voiced Jean, which I don't know. I loved Catherine Disher's rendition of Jean. Like when read, well, all of the actors from the original series, when I read comic books, I read them in their voices, like all of them. I mean, of course, some of them couldn't be helped because some of them unfortunately passed away. Some of them were just replaced, which I didn't understand why. Like, why was Gambit Chris Potter replaced? Still not sure why, but I guess we'll see. Hopefully, I mean, I'm not going to judge it before I see it, is basically what I'm saying. But anyway, so Dr. Val Cooper, she appeared in this one, X-Men, Uncanny X-Men 176, and she just has a brief appearance, and she's testifying before, her peers about the dangers of mutants, and the fact that the U.S. used to be the only country with superpowered individuals. Because of course you see, Fantastic Four, Avengers, X-Men, all these Spider-Man, all these superheroes, of course, came from, the United States. And so she's arguing now that with the appearance of mutants, every single country has their own super beings. And she thinks that they should counteract that with employing mutants under government control, whether the mutants want to or not. Basically, she's saying if we have to force them, we should. Which she softens her position a little bit, but not by much. Okay, so she's just, briefly mentioned in here. And plus, since she's going to be in the new series, I just wanted to talk about her briefly. And then the Fenris twins are introduced. Well, not introduced, but they're the main protagonist of this story. And we actually meet them and this is a really cool issue, which maybe I'll do a video on it later, but I'm just going to touch on their appearance really quick. So this uh, Storm, after losing her powers, is in Africa, which we're going to talk about that in a different video because that's one of the um, titles that the cartoon is going to touch on. That story, which is one of my favorites, and I won't talk about it, and you'll see why. So we see Storm in Africa, and they're just at this, this out of the way brush station, and Andreas, he's getting fresh with the owner of this, and Storm tells him to back off, keep his hands to himself. And she basically teaches them a lesson. Storm does. And they don't know who she is, but this woman knows who she is. She knows that she's Storm. The Wind Rider goddess. I mean, of course, Storm doesn't have her powers, but nobody knows that. And the Strucker twins, they don't even know who Storm is. Anyway, so just briefly, introduce that. The Strucker twins are of course, the children of Baron Strucker, one of the Hydra members, and they're mutants, but they aren't worried about their fellow mutants. They are worried. They have their own agenda, basically. So here it opens, the Magneto being led into the chamber in Paris in shackles, and they just go over, who he is, his first appearance, at Cape Citadel, the missile base, and all his misdeeds and everything he has done. And so I wanted to just point out Belle Cooper, because there she is again, right here, with Freedom Force, her her first established mutant government sponsored group, and then of course X Factor. And they're the ones that actually brought Magneto in. And so they're liking this to, there hasn't been a trial like this since the Nuremberg trials, the trials of the Nazi war criminals. And so they have, the judges are selected from, there's no jury, and there's 5 judges that have been selected from the permanent members of the UN Security Council. And that would be France, Great Britain, China, Soviet Union, and the US. Of course, this was 1985, so we still have the Soviet Union. Russia, that was dissolved in December 1991, so it's still referred to as the Soviet Union at this point. So for the defense, prosecuting the case is England's Attorney General, Sir James Jaspers, and the defense is a Gabrielle Haller, which you guys might remember her. She's Legion's mom, which at this point Xavier did know about Legion. Of course, in the very beginning, he had no idea, but at this point, in the comic books, he does. So she, as the Israeli ambassador to England, is the defense, and she's assisted by Charles Xavier, who's the foremost expert in human genetics and mutation. Of course, they don't know he's mutant. So of course the trial is generating a lot of publicity. There's lots of rioting going on, and here we have Fenris, who are following the trial very closely, and they think that this is their perfect opportunity to get revenge on, because Charles, Gabrielle, and Magneto are all in the same place, all at the same time. So they think this is the perfect place to get revenge. So you see the X-Men all of a sudden appear, X-Men and the mutants all of a sudden appear in the middle of Paris. And this actually is talking about when they went to Asgard, which I did a video on that. It's the X-Men New Mutants versus Loki. And this is where we saw Storm, the goddess of thunder. I think that video was a while ago, but if you scroll down, I'm sure you can find it. So this is where they have been, and they just got back because Loki promised he would send them home, and he did to Earth, just not New York, not in the right place. So they, of course, have gathered a crowd, and Rachel just makes it seem like, they just disappeared. They're not there. And I'm gonna try really hard to like go through this quickly because there's, it's a double-sized issue and I've already spent like 5 minutes talking about other stuff. So I'm gonna try to go through this quickly. So basically there's this group of terrorists going around pretending that they're the X-Men attacking military installations. They attacked one in Poland. And like I said, they're framing the X-Men for it. And Scott knows that Xavier is dying. But of course, Xavier won't tell anyone that he's dying. But Scott, he knows. But they don't speak about it. Oh, and if you're wondering, like, hey, what the heck? Why is Professor Xavier standing? Okay, so um, so back in, I think it was like Uncanny X-Men 165 when they're with the Starjammers and they're fighting the Brood. Um, they implanted an egg in Professor Xavier's body, so they had to destroy it. So the Starjammers gave, like, his soul was still fine, but his body was destroyed. So the Starjammers cloned a body for him and put his soul in it. So that's why he can walk. And of course, he loses his ability to walk later too. But we'll talk about that at the very end. So we go back to the trial, and basically Xavier's telling Scott, "You need to find out who's framing the X-Men." Um, so basically, the prosecutor is like, I don't understand, why Magneto has done all this because there's no country where it's a crime to be a mutant. There's no concentration camps. They're treated exactly the same as everybody else. So what gives him the right to cause all this destruction in the name of mutants? Um, and then we have Germany, where there's actually a U.S. Air Force base, and see, it says Free Magneto, the X-Men. So again, this group has attacked another military installation and blamed the X-Men. And after every single, incident, of course, the public's more ramped up and more just like, kill them, kill all the mutants, look at what they're doing. So basically, Gabrielle argues that there's all these recent histories full of criminals and terrorists who, were admittedly so, that the international community has embraced and later accepted because of what they stood for, that they were fighting for, their cause. So how is that different than what Magneto has done? And plus, and this is again where it gets weird. This is why I'm like, okay, how are they going to do this trial of Magneto in the animated series? Because so her argument is because since Magneto, okay, in the battle with this mutant Alpha that Magneto created, he died, basically was regressed to infancy. And so her argument is that since we know Magneto was an adolescent at Auschwitz, he should be like 60 years old. And yet this man standing in front of us is in his early 30s. How's that possible? She's saying he actually died that day. And so therefore, and death is the ultimate punishment for any crime. So therefore, he should not be punished for his crimes because he's not that man. He's already died in payment for his crimes, and he's not the same person. And of course, the prosecutor's like, what the heck? He's still, regardless of how old he was, he still committed those crimes. Oh, anyway. And then, so the X-Men are trying to figure out, okay, what are we going to do? Like, we need to find these people who are imitating us because they're destroying our reputation and just fueling this anti-mutant hate. And Charles makes a point to say, we can't go to the Avengers or the Fantastic Four because they'll just feel like obligated to arrest us because, of course, everyone thinks we're criminals. So basically, the head judge says, okay, so since he has basically the crimes that Magneto committed will be restricted to those that happen after his resurrection. So all the other crimes before that are to be stricken from the record, which of course the public is not happy about. And so now the trial really begins. So the X-Men stake out a hospital, which they think will be the next logical target of this attack. Which, yes, the attack takes place, and they try their best to stop it and rescue everyone that they can. And of course, the police show up and think that they're responsible and try to arrest them. And of course, it shows up in the news that the X-Men attack the hospital, which they didn't, but of course, they get blamed because they were there. So here we see Kitty reflective, like, what's the point of all this? It just seems hopeless. And Gabrielle reminds her that, we have to be the ones who stand up for peace. We have to be the ones that don't let, the Holocaust, don't let something like that happen again to future generations. Like, we have to stand up. We have to be the voice of reason. We have to fight. We can't surrender. And then, okay, this is interesting because also it's, okay, so here's Madeline. Um, and she's at the mansion basically by herself. She's pregnant with Cable. And in the week that the X-Men have gotten back, all the other X-Men have checked on her except for Cyclops. And she was like, what the heck? She says, baby, I love your father dearly, but sometimes he can be a real jerk. Yeah, that's true. If you know Cyclops' history, yeah, he can be a real jerk, especially when it comes to Maddie. So Corsair and Lilandra up here, and they're like, where's Charles? Because um, through her psychic link to him, she can tell that he's dying, that he's in trouble, and she knows that that Shi'ar technology can save him. So she's trying to find him in time so she can save him. And Madeline's like, they're not here, they're in Paris, and so they have to go back to their ship and recalibrate so that they can go to Paris. And you see Maddie, she goes into labor right here. And we could see an appearance of Binary, Carol Danvers when she had the binary power, which I always thought it was cool that she was a member of the Starjammers. I always thought that was fun since Rogue took her powers, that she got new powers. And this was interesting because basically this panel, Kitty is upset because she realizes she might need glasses because she can't read the signs outside. She's like, I'm a superhero and yet I need glasses. How it isn't fair. But of course she's young. She's like 13. So she's still a kid. So they're kind of showing that she's still a kid by this kind of behavior sometimes. So they get on with the trial and they bring this admiral out, this Soviet admiral, and the prosecutor asked, didn't Magneto sink your submarine? And he said, yes, he did. And then the defense said, well, what kind of submarine was it? Was it armed with nuclear weapons? And he's like, yeah. And she said, well, didn't four of those nuclear weapons fire at Magneto's home island? And he said, well, yes, but we were just, protecting ourselves. We were provoked. He threatened us. So the Soviet Union act in self-defense. And then we have Rachel, because they realized that the blast that, Colossus and Rogue got blasted with was organic in nature. So they have Rachel find the person that belongs to. Scott asked her to, and she's like, that's no problem. She's thinking to herself, she's like, that's no problem, Daddy, because, of course, Jean and Scott are her parents. Um, and she said, I used to do that all the time when I was a hound. I would hunt mutants, find them, and then, kill them, or so that they could be killed. So she said, I swore, on your graves that I would never do that again, but with the stakes so high, how can I not? So she found them. So we go back to the trial. So Magneto says, I totally admit that I sank that sub and destroyed their city, but I destroyed the city without any loss of life. He wanted to make sure he, pointed that out. And of course, the defense asked, so why did you do that? He said, well, the same reason they said is that, self-defense, self-preservation. I feared for my life. So, and then the prosecutor says, well, didn't you threaten the world? Like, didn't you say everyone better disarm and give me political control or else I'll, annihilate the world? And Magneto says, yes, I did say that. But he thought that using force, matching force with force would be the only thing that they would understand. Like, that's the language that they understand. And he realizes later that any force that he brings will only result in more force. Like fire with fire, it just makes more fire. And he realized that too late. So he says, my goals haven't changed, but my methods have. And the judge is like, do you still seek world domination? And he's like, no, my dream has always just been to protect my own kind, to spare them, the fate my family and I suffered at Auschwitz. He says, you can't tell me that can't happen, because that's a lie. You kill each other for the color of your skin, religion, political reasons, or really no reason at all. What's to stop you from putting mutants on that list and killing us and putting us in concentration camps and everything? And so he thought that he could, improve the world by getting rid of all the weapons and being in control himself. But he realizes that's not the way to do it either. That just caused the world to fear him and therefore fear mutants. And he says, I realize I'm the reason mutants are being targeted. And I feel like that's unfair for them. And that's why I'm here at this trial, and I will accept any punishment that you guys deem necessary, because I don't want mutants to suffer on my behalf. So basically, the next target that this group targets is a cruise ship. That's where Rachel finds them. So there's all these armored guards. I'm not gonna narrate the fight scenes because I think this panel is pretty cool. Like, Colossus goes all the way through the stained glass window, and then just this, this right here, just the stained glass in that one panel. I think that's a pretty cool shot. Yeah, I like that. So they're still fighting. Apparently the armor on these guys is super top notch. Like, even Wolverine's claws aren't doing much to them. So they're like, well, okay, I don't understand, because there's just all these goons, but where's the super powered people? Like, how come, it's just these goons? So what happens is, of course, it was all just a distraction for Fenris. And, of course, the twins, when they touch, they are, super powerful, but they have to be touching. And I don't know if any of you watched The Gifted, but this is, those two, the Von Strucker children, um, Andrea and Andreas. And they had power in the show. They had powers on their own, but when they touched and combined their powers, of course, it was even huge, like 10 times more. So this is where they came from. Okay, so they're saying, we are Fenris, the great wolf, and we, with our power, before our power, the entire world will bow, and we have come for Magneto. And Gabrielle's like, stop them, Charles, you need to. And he's like, my powers are too weak, because of course he's dying. But nobody else knows that, except, well, Lander knows that. So, and Magneto's like, I'm here, I'm not going anywhere. And Rachel finally realizes where the actual battle is. And so the twins try really hard, but they can't get through his shield. So what they do is make the floor collapse underneath him. And that also causes some of the judges and Charles and Gabrielle to plunge into the basement. And Magneto saves everyone to make sure, no one breaks anything. And so they follow him to the basement, and Rachel tries to incapacitate them, using the rubble. And they just break free. And Charles somehow realizes that they can only have their powers when they touch. So he dives through them, breaks their grasp, so that they can be stopped. And the prosecuting attorney, Sir James, grabs a rock, grabs on Andrea, and means to he means to kill her. And Magneto stops him and says, stop, there's been, there will be no more killing. And the main judge says, Magneto had no rock in his hand like you, but he could have crushed them, because they didn't have their powers anymore, but he chose not to. He chose to be merciful. And Rachel says, I hear there, like, something's rattling around in my mind, like struckers. And Gabrielle and Magneto and Charles realizes that what's going on is that because Baron von Strucker had kidnapped Gabrielle, and Magneto and Charles saved her from them, and basically the twins think that they are responsible for his death. So Magneto's like, what should we do with them, Charles? And he says, we should turn them over to the authorities. And in the middle of saying that, he's like, oh, my heart. And in that, distraction, the twins rejoin hands. They blow out the wall so that the sin comes in the river and washes them away, and Charles and Magneto. And the prosecuting attorney says, good riddance. And the main judge slaps him and says, you talk too much. And it just reminds me of, the Batman and Robin meme that has been circulating forever, where he's slapping Robin. That's what it reminds me of. Like, when I first saw that, I laughed because I'm like, oh, because that's what it makes me think of. So Magneto saves Charles, and they're washed away in this garden. And I mean, Charles knows he's dying and says, Magneto, you have to take over for me. And, and Magneto's like, I can't do that. Charles says, promise me you'll carry on in my place. And Magneto says, that's impossible. Your X-Men, because Charles says, take care of my X-Men and teach the new mutants. And Magneto says, that's impossible. They'll never accept me. And, he says, I'm not worthy of your trust. Like, you can't ask this of me. And Charles says, prove yourself worthy. Once we walked the same path, and then we split off, and you yourself said that you chose wrong, that you were wrong. This is a chance to redeem yourself. This is a chance for you to, you know, stand for something. And Magneto's like, it'll be hard. But he's like, I'll try. And so Lilandra reaches them basically just in time. And she says, we'll take Charles back with us, fix him up, and we'll return within the hour. Well, they don't. But we'll talk about that in just a second. So basically, he also says, Magneto says, suppose I fail and betray your dream. And Charles says, our dream. And you'll never know if you don't try, like right before he leaves. And then the X-Men turn the Fenris goons over to the authorities and say, these are the ones that were causing all the problems. These are the ones that were doing the terrorist attacks. But, we've done our job, so now do yours. So basically, we come to the very last page, and the judge says, this isn't up for me to decide anymore. This is now in the court of public opinion. And they will judge, the X-Men and Magneto. Their fate is now in their hands, whether they're innocent or guilty. And Rachel says, I can't find any, any sense of Professor Xavier. Where is he gone? And Magneto at the very end says, I gave you my word, Charles. Come with me. I will be true to it. So, okay, just really quick, since this is a long video. Like I said, it's a double-sized issue, and I tried to talk as fast as I could and hit the highlights. So Xavier, he leaves in this issue, and he doesn't come back, like, in the comic books until 6 years later, like to Uncanny X-Men 275. And then he doesn't come back to Earth until 278 to battle the Shadow King. And that's how he loses the use of his legs again. And I don't know. I find it interesting because I kind of, like, at some point at reading the comic books, you go through the Fall of Mutants and then the Outback, going through the Siege of Perilous, and then ending up scattered places. You don't even, like, I didn't really notice, oh, where's Xavier? He never came back. Yeah. But I mean, it's good for them to shake it up. I mean, look what they did with the New Era recently, and now they're shaking it up again this summer, which, I'm not sure how I feel about that, but like I said, with the cartoon also, I will wait to judge that until it actually happens, until I read it. So I'm just curious, speaking of the cartoon, what they're going to do, how they're going to do this trial, because obviously in the animated series, Magneto didn't really, he didn't die, for one, so they can't excuse all of his previous acts, because, in the cartoon, he attacked a missile base, attacked a chemical plant, kidnapped Senator Kelly, Asteroid M fired missiles at them, even though it wasn't him, but still, there's no way for anyone else to know that, for them to prove. Anyway, so, I mean, he did all these things. So I'm just curious as to how they're going to do that. And then obviously he's still going to be in the show. So I don't know. I guess we'll just see, because he didn't die. There's no Fenris for him to save, like the judge and other people from them. Well, I mean, I don't know. I haven't heard any rumors about them being introduced. So anyway, this video is super long, and I apologize. But I'm just really excited about the cartoon, and I'm really looking forward to it. And so I hope you join me for the next cartoon video that I want to talk about, Life and Death. Um, it's about Storm, and it's one of my favorite stories about her ever, and you'll see why. So until next time, bye.